Jackson, being Steven Jackson, started talking trash, and Michael got furious and started trash talking to Steven Jackson. And not only that, he started killing him. It was only at half court. This is a 50, I think it was 50 or 51.
Hi, I'm Mikey Domagala, host of Inside Buzz. There's only been one Mexican-born player to be drafted in NBA history, and I'm lucky enough to have him on today's show for episode 12. Eduardo Najera officially put Mexico on his back and officially introduced them to NBA basketball when he was selected 38th overall in the 2000 NBA draft by the Houston Rockets. Eddie Najera played 12 seasons in the NBA, including having his best years with the Dallas Mavericks and Denver Nuggets. He led both teams to the playoffs, and of course, he played alongside many legends like Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, Jason Kidd, and even played under Michael Jordan in Charlotte. If I went through the entire list, and I will in the interview, of the players he played with and the coaches he played under, you wouldn't even believe me. After his playing days, he was the head coach and the GM of the NBA D-League's Texas Legends, where he put in the work for 3 years. Today, he's a scout for the Dallas Mavericks. Eduardo, welcome to Inside Buzz. I hope you and your family are staying safe during this quarantine. What are you hearing about the 2019-20 season resuming?
Just following the gossip around social media throughout meetings, there was a lot of speculation of, canceling the remainder of the season and perhaps the playoffs, pushing it towards the end of the summer. And it seems like they finally made a decision, although it's not for certain, at least not in my opinion, but it seems like we're going to reassume the rest of the season in Orlando, and obviously we'll take over in the playoffs. So I'm excited about it because we were in a good spot as, representative of the Mavericks. We're excited about the team, the young team that we have, and I'm looking forward to seeing these younger guys performing in the playoffs.
So Eduardo, let's start from the beginning for your career. Forget all the NBA games you played in, all the playoff games you won. You're 14 years old, 6'8", throwing a baseball 80 miles an hour. Your focus is wanting to become a baseball player. How'd basketball get in the mix there, and how'd you become a pro basketball player?
That's a great question, Mikey. My father was a baseball player. He was a good one too. I remember seeing him play multiple times when I was a kid. I tried to follow his footsteps. However, when I was 14, I grew about 8 inches in one summer. So I'm a July kid. So when I turned 15, I was already 6'8", living in Mexico, squeezing my 16 size shoe into a 12. And obviously, when I went to my freshman year in high school, it's a little different than the U.S. At 15, I was going into my freshman year, trying out for the baseball team. And by the way, that's how you get accepted to the school. If you have some sort of talent with athletics, they give you an opportunity to go to school there. So it was a pretty high-end school that I went to. However, the baseball coach literally just looked at me as a giant, of course, at 6'8", living in Mexico, and he was 5'5", 5'6". So he said, I don't even want you to try out. You're not good for baseball. You're too tall and too slow. And he suggested that I try out for basketball. Now, I did play basketball growing up. I play all sports, of course, but basketball came easier for me. I'm the youngest of 5 brothers, and I used to just kick their butt in the basketball court to the point there was a lot of fist fights. However, I never played organized basketball. I never played growing up. I was never a part of a team. When I went from baseball to basketball, then I fit in. It was just an environment that was there that I didn't know. There was a lot more guys my size that were always into the game of basketball, but I was a rookie, and I don't even think I could walk and whistle at the same time back then when I was 15. But it took a lot of work, a lot of dedication. But the key was that when I was 15, a coach literally killed my dreams as a baseball player, but it also gave me the opportunity to migrate somewhere else. And I grew the passion for the game of basketball at 15 years old.
Crazy story, man. And when was it exactly that you realized, you know what, I'm gonna let these baseball dreams, I'll put those on the back burner. I'm going all in for basketball. When was that moment?
I went to the University of Oklahoma. So when I got to college, I wanted to play both sports. I wanted to do basketball and baseball. At that time, I was already 18, so my basketball skills developed rather quickly. And of course, it was mainly talent. I was taller, faster, stronger than most of the people. But I did practice a lot since I migrated to basketball. However, I still had that itch to continue playing baseball because of my father. My father gave me a hard time. He said basketball was for, of course, he was a typical macho man that was used to tell me basketball was for women and all these little things in my brain, planting negative seeds. At the end of the day, I'm glad that I did not listen to him, but it took me a while to get over the hump in terms of continuing trying to play and trying out for baseball. And I believe it was my sophomore year in college when I said, okay, this is a great opportunity that I have, not only to have a basketball career, but also to use basketball to get an education. And that's when I became really serious about basketball.
Did you idolize any basketball players at the time, or were you basically all idolizing baseball players?
My idol obviously was my father growing up. Then I moved on to Fernando Valenzuela. He was a hell of a pitcher back in the day, playing for the Dodgers, threw non-hitter or had non-hitter games. He was the idol as a baseball player. Then the 90s came about, and I remember watching Magic against Larry Bird, the Celtics against the Lakers. The Lakers and the Celtics were sort of the teams in Mexico to kind of watch, but it was throughout the world and mainly in the US. When the 90s came about and the Bulls started obviously dominating, I literally started following Michael and idolizing Michael Jordan just like any other kid at that age. I was 15 back then when they won the first NBA championship, and I also was getting into basketball. However, I figured out that I couldn't float in the air. I didn't have the jumping ability. I really didn't have anything to compare myself to Michael. And I started seeing Scottie Pippen as the guy that kind of started idolizing on the basketball court, because he was more a versatile type of player. I always wanted to play all positions, 6'8", 15 in Mexico. They say, no, you just stay in the paint, you're the center, just get all the rebounds, and just don't dribble, don't shoot, don't do anything. And I was like, wait a second, I can do all these other things. Scottie Pippen was the guy that I started sort of mimicking my game, towards his game. And it worked because then I ended up being sort of a point guard, playing in Mexico and even throughout different levels. When I got to the national team at 18, and I was already pretty good in Mexico for the basketball level I'm talking about. And I was kind of the point guard of the national team at 18, and it really helped me develop multiple skills and abilities by not listening to some of the coaches in Mexico. But he was a guy, if I have to pick a guy that I followed footsteps and idolized for the most part, was Scottie Pippen.
At the time, I'm not sure how big basketball was in Mexico. You could fill me in on that, but what were your parents and people at back home feeling about your basketball decision?
My dad didn't really support my decision to continue with basketball. My mom did. However, moms, they're always great. They always support their child no matter what they do, and that's what a mother is supposed to do. My brothers and sisters, they didn't really know my ability. They didn't really see it at the beginning. However, when I got to the University of Oklahoma, and it took me a lot of work, a lot of discipline and consistency in my game. But that's when my family and friends, because I did have a lot of people out of Mexico not believing that I had the talent to even play at a college level. So there was a lot of people hating on me, hating on my game more so than anything. And they, coaches, for the most part, they thought that I was going to be back in Mexico playing in the professional league. But I never doubted myself. And eventually my dad kind of started opening up his mind to basketball. And once he saw that I was pretty good, then he was mentoring me, on the basketball court and outside the basketball court. So they were part of all the decisions that I've made throughout my career. And then I also had great teammates and great coaches throughout my years that they also supported me, friends that, they encouraged me to stay with it. As a Mexican kid migrating to the US, it was not easy. Every moment I wanted to go back to the thing that is most comfortable for me, which was going back to my country. But there was a lot of people that supported me. I cannot sit over here and say it was all me. It wasn't. I got the best from my coaches. I got a lot of support from my family and my friends in Mexico and the US.
So then you're a star at Oklahoma. You led them to the NCAA tournament 4 straight times. Then it happens. Eduardo Najera, 38th overall pick by the Houston Rockets. Then you're traded to Dallas in the 2000 draft. And of course, first Mexican player drafted in NBA history. Take me back to that day of being drafted and all of the emotions that you went through.
I was a little upset that I went to the second round, to be honest. I thought that my game was pretty good. I proved that I dominated college level. However, we went through that transition. The NBA started going younger, and they started kind of seeing the younger kids. And now you see it even more so because the NBA teams, they want to get a hold of that talent and teach them at a young age rather than go through college and then you have to still teach them. So it kind of, in 2000, it kind of went that way. So they started overlooking the older guys coming out of college. But at the end of the day, the draft was a great thing, a great process. It was a lot of emotions because I knew that I had finally accomplished one of the first steps that I had in mind, which was getting drafted. I didn't really care for the plays that I got selected at because the fact is the draft only tells you where you start your NBA career. And that was my mindset. So as soon as they called my name, obviously we had a draft party. I was excited. I was crying. I was, full of emotions. But at the same time, I was cognizant of the process that I was about to start. And to be honest, I did it for so many years. High school, I started from right on the bench, same in college. I wasn't playing as much. And I knew that when I got to the NBA, I had to work my butt off and fight for a spot on the roster. Luckily, I went to the right team, a team that was full of international players, which was Dallas Mavericks. And that made my transition easier. And, I had an ego just like any other NBA player. I felt that I could score, I could do so many things, but at the same time, I was smart enough to figure out that the things that the Mavericks needed was the defensive presence, the rebounding, the toughness, and the tenacity, and that's where I kind of concentrate on. And as a result, I ended up making the team and having a long career.
And to go off the path of my questions a little bit, we'll talk about you scouting and international players. You said how young the league is. I totally agree. Did you have a hand in looking at Luka Doncic and really bringing him over to the Dallas Mavericks?
I wish I could say that it was all me. I concentrate more on pro personnel. We do have international scouts, but a lot of credit most of the credit goes to them. I did study Luka Doncic. I'm just as surprised as everybody else that he's he's blossoming to a superstar at such a young age and so rapidly. We knew he was special, but our president, Donnie Nelson, he was the one that made it happen. Now, with that said, we did get a little lucky as well, because to be able to make that trade, all the stars kind of aligned for the Dallas Mavericks. And yes, we had him ranked at number 1, which I thought most teams in the NBA had Luka at number 1. And just luckily, they passed on him. And obviously, Atlanta, they wanted Trae Young, which I also did. He's an OU grad, or he's a Sooner, so I can correlate to that. And I had him ranked pretty high as well, Trae Young, and he's had a great career so far. But at the same time, we knew that Luka had that winning mentality. He was going to help us build something special. And sadly enough, we kind of talked about perhaps being better than Dirk at such a young age. And it's unfair because Dirk, he's probably the best European player in the history of the game so far. And we were comparing Luka, to Dirk, but at the same time, we're thinking about 5 to 10 years down the road, not in the first 2 years where he just blew out and exploded. But at the end of the day, Mark Cuban had a lot to say in it. He makes the decision, or the ultimate decision, and he was involved. And I'm just happy that we got a legit 6'8" point guard or 6'7" point guard that has got us through the hump in such a short period of time. Most of the franchises, it'll take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to rebuild. I mean, if you want to take the Philadelphia 76ers, they have so many losing years in with us, and that's a lot of credit for Mark Cuban and our president and the international scouts and all the scouts, because we made it happen at a short period of time. But at the end of the day, all the credit goes to Luka, because he has put in all the work and he has put in a show every time that he steps on the court.
And you could also relate to Luka. Of course, you're an international player. What's it like to be an international player? What are the advantages and the disadvantages?
The disadvantage is very clear. The difference of cultures, the difference of languages. I obviously didn't speak English when I came to the U.S. The good thing about Luka is he not only spoke English, but he spoke Spanish. He speaks 5 languages, I think. So really smart kid, which makes him extra special. But yeah, the culture is a little shocking at the beginning, but at the end of the day, this is the best country in the world, in my opinion. And I'm sure that I can speak for a lot of international players. It is the best country in the world. Still tough to adjust to the culture and to the environment and to a different city, especially at a young age, like Luka at 19. But I think that's the biggest disadvantage. The best advantage is the fact that you do go through tough decision making, which makes you ahead of everybody else in the U.S. because you already have made sacrifices. You have decided or made the toughest decision in your life, which is leaving your home country, and that carries on as a person. And I think that making decisions on the basketball court, it becomes easier because you already have gone through a lot tougher decisions that I think it carries on as a basketball player. And when you are on the fly, basketball becomes more fun and a lot easier for international players.
And that trade on draft night to the Dallas Mavericks for yourself, you know what you were getting into. Steve Nash, Michael Finley, and of course, Dirk Nowitzki. Can you take me through each one of those guys and playing alongside of them?
Well, Dirk became one of my heroes because of what he did in 2011. I was there in 2010. Sadly enough, I got traded to Charlotte for Tyson Chandler. It happens. But Dirk became my hero. My favorite teammate of all time is Steve Nash. I mean, I just love his demeanor, his personality, him as a human being. He was kind of the glue that got everybody together. Dirk at that time, he was kind of like me. His English was not as good. He knew the language of basketball as I did, but Stevie really helped us and embraced us and kind of took us on his wings and really helped international players. Mike Finley was already a stud. Mike Finley was a leader at that time, and he was already an all-star. He was already, his mindset was more so about making the playoffs and taking the next step for the franchise and representing the franchise properly. And we kind of let him lead in that regard because we were so young back then. But at the end of the day, that combination, when you throw in Nick the Quick, Exel, some other talented players, because we have a lot of players, it just made it a lot of fun. Those were probably my favorite years in my NBA career. My first 4 years, where it was no drama. We all were on the same page, and it was about winning a championship, which I thought was pretty special, and we came really, really close to doing so in 2003.
And you brought up Nick Van Exel. I mean, in my opinion, he's one of the most underrated stars in NBA history. I feel like today, nobody talks about him. On the Mavericks, he was a little older, but on the Lakers, I mean, he was dominant. What could you say about playing alongside him?
He had a stigma of a bad teammate. For whatever reason, in LA and Denver, and I believe that he did ask for a trade out of Denver at one point, and don't quote me on that, but I think that he wanted to get out. So I don't know whether, he developed that stigma of, not a player that does everything for the franchise, for the team. But when he came to us, he was just easygoing. He was fitting in. He accepted a role off the bench, knowing that he still could play at an all-star type of level. And he really impressed me with his competitive edge. His talent was incredible. He was our best post player, believe it or not. And back then, there was a lot of post-ups. The game hadn't changed yet, but he was incredible with the ball, his vision, his passing ability. His defense is questionable, but he spent so much energy on offense that forget the defense. His best defense was his offense. And I remember vividly that he carried us in the second round with his play against the Sacramento Kings. He just went off. I believe that Bobby Jackson even called him out in the media saying, "Oh, he's not going to score 36 points again." And the next game, he scored 38. But he was the main reason we advanced to the Western Finals in 2003. Luck ran out. Dirk got hurt. He sprained his knee, and unfortunately, Nick couldn't carry it. The whole team past the San Antonio Spurs, and as a result, we fell short. But he was a big part of our success. Everybody kind of talks about the big three back then, which was Steve Nash, Finley, and of course Dirk Nowitzki. But he was an addition to our team that was tremendous for our success, especially in the postseason.
And you've obviously spent a lot of time with Dirk Nowitzki. And, through the media, of course, I don't know him, but it seems like he's a very funny guy. Do you have a classic Dirk Nowitzki story?
He's very blunt. He's very blunt, which again, it goes back to the international and the English barrier. The same with me. I call it the way I see it. Perhaps I don't have a sophisticated vocabulary, especially when you're young. So as soon as he sees something, he just says it. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, and it kind of developed that personality, which now with me, since I have a family and kids, you have to kind of communicate a little bit better because you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you just don't flat out kind of mess with their confidence. But Dirk was that guy. But when you get to know him, the commentary is incredibly funny, especially when it came to Nelly giving instructions or Rick Carlisle. The funniest thing was Rick is very methodical with his offense, his system. He's obviously very highly intelligent as a coach. But the funniest thing was when we were running a play and it was very specific and we had to do everything detail-oriented, that it was very methodical. And the funniest thing was that Dirk is like, well, might as well let me do the robot dance over here as we're like going through the play. It was the funniest thing, but at the same time, I felt bad because I was like, come on, Dirk, you can't do that. But those are the type of jokes that he had all the time. And it was just a blessing spending so much time with them. He also got very serious in practices. And I tell him, I said, the reason you became a great offensive player was because he wanted me to guard him every single day in practice. And guess what? He takes most of the shots. So it's really hard to defend a guy that takes so many shots and you can't take a possession of. So every day, every practice, come on, Eddie, you gotta guard me. You know, sometimes when Sean Bradley was guarding him, I say, no, Sean, just even as an opponent during practice competing, he would want Sean to step away. He wanted the tougher guy. And he told me, like, I don't care, just go as hard as you can, just don't hurt me, of course. But I was careful at all times. But he was very serious about his game and he wanted to take it to the next level. So the jokes, the combination of the joking and his seriousness just made him a really, a great teammate to be around, because when he had to get serious, he was, okay, let's get to work and let's get all the jokes around and let's do what needs to be done to win ball games.
And after your first stint in Dallas, you found yourself with Golden State and then in Denver. And in Denver, you had some of your best seasons as a pro. Was it the air? What was it that really helped you elevate your game?
My career is a little different. My third year in the NBA, I was taken off, and I thought that it was going to be my best year yet. We started the season winning 14 games in a row, and then my knee gave up. And I remember it was Brian Ross, the one that blew out my knee, took a charge on the fast break. Who does that? So he just stood in front of me. My knee went back, hyperextended it, torn the cartilage behind the kneecap and the femur. So my knee was pretty messed up. However, I did the surgery, bounced back, and I was just not the same player. So I kind of went downhill after that. And then I went to Golden State. I was still struggling with my left knee. But when I got to Denver, finally I did my second knee surgery, which was a clean out. And it made a huge difference. However, I just didn't have the lift. I didn't have the youth anymore. And I had to really rely on my basketball IQ. So when I got to the Denver Nuggets, now we have the opposite team as the Mavericks. With the Mavericks, we had a bunch of shooters. And you have Steve Nash, Nowitzki, Finley was shooting the three, Nick Van Exel was shooting the three, and the rest of the guys. So they needed me to be a slasher. They needed me to defend. They needed me to do the other things, to be able to win games. And I accepted that role because at the end of the day, that right there was going to keep me on the floor. And the best thing for a player, it doesn't matter, is competing, when the game is on the line. And that's what I wanted. So when I got to Denver, it was the opposite. So now we have non-shooters. And we have Melo, that his three ball wasn't there. Now we have Marcus Camby, Kenyon Martin, we have Nene, and we only had J.R. Smith that can make a three. So then George Karl gives me the opportunity. He said, hey, look, you take charges, you defend, you rebound, and you really help the team win ball games. If you open, as long as you're practicing your three ball in a consistent basis, and I see it, if you open, I have no problem letting it fly, because at the end of the day, we need to open up that paint. So then he gave me that opportunity, and I started practicing as opposed to Nelly. Nelly said, don't shoot it. You grab the opposite rebound, don't even put it back, pass it to the three-point shooter. I was like, okay. So George changed my game completely, and I think that it kind of resurrected my my career, because then it became a complete or a two-way player where I wasn't a pure shooter, but I was respectable from the three ball. And that's when the game started changing. So everybody wanted to shoot threes, and it went to the three-point line. We were playing so fast with Denver. I remember practicing with a 12-second shot clock, practicing for a significant, hour and a half, 2 hours. That is really hard to do. I mean, it's a lot of running, and first shot available, whether it's a three or a layup. And that was our philosophy. You love the rim, you like the three. Nothing in between. So we started kind of fading away from the post-ups, the pull-ups, and it helped me tremendously. And I think that George Karl has all the credit. I got to give him all the credit because he's the one that kind of changed my game. And as a result, I had my best years as an NBA player, and it really extended my career. That's the reason I got my last contract with the Nets, in all honesty.
And in Denver, of course, you mentioned Melo and then Allen Iverson for a couple seasons. What do you remember about playing with those two legends? So you played with Dirk, Nash, and now you're here with Melo and Iverson.
Lots of things. I mean, I remember they were not as serious as Dirk and Steve were. Allen practiced and so did Melo, but I remember seeing Dirk and Steve Nash, and I developed those good habits. They always came back and shot the ball every single evening. On a day off, of course, if we had a game, they wouldn't do it, but we would practice and they would come back at 5, 6, depending on how the body felt, but they would always work on their shooting technique. In Denver, we were lacking that, and it seems like we did the minimum when it comes to winning, and we just relied on pure talent, which was speed and athleticism, and I just didn't like that. Allen Iverson came to us, same thing, after his career with the Philadelphia 76ers. There was a lot of question marks. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Does he like to practice? Is he going to want to skip practice? No, he was incredible as a teammate. He did everything that was asked from him, and George loved him. Melo was a little different. I think he was a little more immature, and obviously he was younger. He was more he was concentrating more on scoring and leading the NBA and scoring more so than winning games and advancing in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, you can't blame him. He was very young. He was 22, 23 when I was there. Eventually, they got to the Western Finals, and I think is when he started realizing that he needed more help from his teammates, more so than his own talent. But what I remember the most is how talented we were and how we dominated just based on athleticism. We didn't utilize a lot of skill, but we still were one of the top teams in the NBA. I just wish that we would have, took things more seriously. There was a lot of missed practices. There was the fight that Melo didn't really think about how he damaged the franchise. He was more about, no, it's me and all that. As a result, we almost didn't make the playoffs. I mean, there was like multiple things that I could pick on that I was very committed to winning, and I just did not like that.
You're talking about that Knicks brawl, right? At MSG?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. So were you involved, or you were on the bench for that one?
I was in the middle of it. and of course, the NBA, you can't fight. It was not the 90s or the 80s. You can go back and look at the highlights. Back then, it was a real physical game. Even when I came into the NBA, I had to be 250 pounds and be strong because you had to go against Carmelo. And even the little guys, John Stockton was a physical guy that would hit you. But that went away, and there was fights and there was arguments and all that. But the NBA did a great job of cleaning that out. This particular brawl, it was just unnecessary. It was very unnecessary. We had the ball game. We were up 20 points. There was a foul that was out of line, But I think being a man is just walking away from conflict, especially when you're in a great position. And that's my opinion, of course. And that's another thing that I did not like about our team with the Denver Nuggets. We competed about who was the biggest uh, thug. And, that's not the way you're supposed to get better as a human being as you grow. And a lot of times I intervened and I was like, look, that's not right. This is the best way to do it because that's the best thing for the team and for the franchise. In that particular ball, it couldn't be avoided. Yes, there was a hard foul. Nate Robinson had a big role into that because he was challenging JR. But at the end of the day, that's when emotional intelligence and composure and, respecting the game come in place. And George Karl did a good job of re-emphasizing those values to avoid those type of scenarios because when that happened, now we lost Melo for 15 games, JR of 25 games, JR for 15 games. I even got suspended, which was not fair, but it just put the franchise, behind the eight ball, and as a result, we didn't perform the way we were supposed to. We barely made the playoffs, and then we were just dragging, and we wasted so much energy in the regular season. And when we got to the playoff time, we had nothing in the tank. It's a result of a stupid brawl. But when you live and learn, and I think that again, Melo and we all kind of grew out of it and got better. And I know Melo learned a lot from his years in Denver because now he shows when he went to the Knicks, he just did not have the same talent, but he performed at a high level.
And when you returned to Dallas for the second time in 2009-10, 33 games with the team, then you get traded, you mentioned that earlier, for Tyson Chandler. And of course, Tyson Chandler's that anchor of that 2011 championship team. How does it feel that you had kind of like, your own fingerprint on that championship based off your trade?
I got a little upset because Ryan Cardinal took my spot. And he literally, he played well. I got to give him credit, but literally he became like the guy that, won the championship. And a lot of times, again, most of NBA players don't get to win a championship. It happens. It's part of the business, making the money, and the trade has to, now that I'm an executive for the Mavericks, I know the trade, you have to kind of match salaries and all that, or at least get as close to it as you can. And I was part of a trade. I remember having this conversation with our president because they did not want to trade me, but he had to, for the trade to go through, I had to be a part of the deal. And again, it was tough to swallow because I went from one of the best teams to the worst team in the NBA for my second time in my career. And I just knew that Tyson going in there, it was the last piece of the puzzle to compete. We had Jason Kidd, which that's another favorite teammate that I have. Jet, Dirk, and when you add Tyson Chandler, now we had great role players like JJ Barea. It was just tough to swallow, but at the same time, hey, I was blessed to have a job and to continue to play in the NBA, the best league in the world. So I just moved on rather quickly, more so than reminiscing in the past. And I still had a great time in Charlotte, a great franchise. I got to know Michael Jordan on a personal level, got to see him practice with us. So it was a great experience. I can't complain about that. But, my resume was pretty darn good up until I don't have that ring to throw it into my resume. And that would have been the icing on the cake for my career.
Hold up. You mentioned Michael Jordan practicing with the Bobcats at the time. You got to go into that one for me because, we're coming off The Last Dance, the ESPN documentary. Everybody wants the MJ stories. Talk to me about knowing MJ and, him in those practices with you guys.
So he practiced multiple times. The one that I saw, the Michael Jordan that we all have seen in the documentary over the last few years, it was when we practicing and we going through a rough patch, Steven Jackson, and we had a pretty good team that year. Steven Jackson, Boris Dia, and Gerald Wallace were the veterans along with myself, but I'm towards the end of my career, so I wasn't playing as much. Practicing to help these guys get better, and Michael decided to jump in. And then not only that, he says, Charles Oakley, come on my team. So they jump on the same team with Gerald Wallace, with Gerald Henderson and somebody else. I don't remember the other player. Of course, Steven Jackson, being Steven Jackson, started talking trash. And at first, as the owner, you have to be careful as the owner. You don't want to go hard. And I think that Steven Jackson started that scrimmage by saying,
that was the past, this is now, and I will bust yo, you know what. Hey.
And Michael got furious and started trash talking to Steven Jackson. And not only that, he started killing him. It was only at half court. This is a 50, I think it was 50 or 51, killing, all of us during a scrimmage. And talking to Steven Jackson, telling him, how's the leather tasting in your mouth every time he made a shot on his face. I mean, it was incredible, his competitiveness at that age, to the point that he became a one-on-one. So I was like, okay, I'd take Charles Oakley, bigger guy, tough guy. Charles and I were just like kind of just watching in the weak side. These two guys go one-on-one, and of course, it did not end up well for Steven Jackson. Michael won the scrimmage. And
he told me about all the championships, everything he's done, sport, points scored, and he reminded me that I was on his team. But he won the trash talking. I think that's the first time in life I ever lost a trash talking match. I honestly went home that night and was hoping I didn't get a call during that night, said MJ has released me. Because I did say some things in my trash talking to defend myself.
After that, we called it a day and we just went home. I think that it was good for the team, because after that, we kind of snapped out of the losing streak that we had, and we started, winning games. But it was one of those experiences that I never thought I was going to go through. And Michael was one of those guys that liked to joke around all the time during practice. And, it was great to seeing him out there being active and just kind of seeing what he meant and what he still can do for the game of basketball.
And do you think if you play against some of your guys right now, do you sometimes do that or not? Or could you win on one-on-ones against them? Or?
I'm pretty sure I can, so I don't want to do that and demolish their confidence, so I stay away from them. I let them think they're good. They think that they are good, but I'm too old to do that anyway.
And you played, against MJ and then for MJ, like you mentioned. What's the pressure of playing for him and him being on the end of the bench and kind of critiquing you? Can you hop into that for me?
He's hardest players, yes. I think that it might have been his second year that he took ownership. He was fairly new when he was running the team, but he was really hard on everybody because and he should be. I mean, he set the bar so high, and his mentality is that way. So he was hard on us, but at the same time on the opposing team. But it was tough to play for him. But at the same time, when you have the experience, I just can't imagine being a young guy like a Kwame Brown playing along with Michael, or him being on the bench trying to tell you what to do. It was tough for me. But at the same time, having the experience, I really blocked it really well. And, I kind of zoom in, and the most important thing to do the things that the team needed to win the ball game rather than looking back. And I developed that, and players develop that, because you can't be constantly looking back at the coach or whatever, the fan or whoever is there as an executive telling you and criticizing you. You got to block that out. But as a young player, having that big presence, and he has a big presence, Michael has a big presence. I don't know whether that was positive or negative on the younger players. And I think that Michael Jordan learned as well, because then he started going back to his suite rather than being next to us, screaming at everybody.
And Eduardo, talk to me about your matchup with Kobe Bryant in the playoffs and having to guard him.
How did I attempt to guard him? Going back to 2008, we got the Lakers in the first round, and obviously they were the favorite team to win. We were talented. We had Melo, Iverson, Kenny Martin, myself, Marcus Camby, Lennox Klyza. And Kobe, he had the same height as me, and possibly stronger than me. And everybody forgot about that. He was a legit 6'7", 230, 35 pounds, but his body movement and athleticism made it look like a guard, like a 6'3" guard. But this guy came into the game, and it seemed like he was on cruise control. George Karl had the mentality, okay, I'm not going to throw the little guys like Kobe because he will punish them. He's stronger, he's taller. So Coach Karl met with Kenyon Martin and myself, and he said, you two guys, Kenyon, you're going to start. You're going to go and guard Kobe every time you're on the court. And when you come on the court, off the bench, he's looking at me, you're going to do the same thing and follow Kenyon. I want you guys to be physical, get him tired, bump him, do whatever it takes to slow him down. Well, clearly that strategy backfired, because the only thing that we did, we just pissed him off and we woke him up. And I remember there was one play that Kenyon was really physical and blocked his shot. And then another play that I blocked his shot, and we were like trying to follow the strategy. He just decided to dominate. And when he woke up, there was no stopping this guy. He shot the three ball, the in-between game, the mid-range. He got to the rim every time he wanted. He started being engaged on defense. He started going for steals, guarding everybody. It was an incredible effort. They swept us. They won all 4 games rather easily, and we never had a chance once Kobe decided to dominate. And I feel that I was a big part of that, and so was Kenyon, by being physical with them rather than let him just kind of be on cruise control, because he was trying to get his teammates involved at all times. Because, Kobe was criticized multiple times for not getting his teammates involved and trying to take over all the time. But this time, he just said, screw it, I'm going to teach these guys a lesson. And I think that he averaged close to 40 points in the series. And he did it from anywhere on the court. It was an incredible performance that I witnessed myself by one of the best players of all time in the NBA, in my opinion, and also one of my favorite players to watch. He not only was great on the court, but off the court, he always talked to me in Spanish. Even when he was trash talking to me, he would do it in Spanish during the game. But that was Kobe. I'm always gonna remember that, and that was a special moment that I share with Kobe Bryant. And obviously, I'm sad to not have him here, for him and his daughter, his family, all the other families. But at the same time, at least I got to experience a little bit of his life on the court and off the court. So I'm forever grateful for those moments.
What's the difference between playing with Steve Nash and Jason Kidd, 2 of the greatest assistmen in NBA history?
I took it for granted. When you're there as teammates, again, you try to concentrate on your game, that you tend to forget those great teammates that you have. And you mentioned Carmelo Anthony. I mean, yes, I pick on him the most because he was the youngest, but my goodness, his talent was unbelievable. Same with AI. But when it comes to Steve Nash and Jason Kidd, the first thing that Steve Nash said to me when I pick and roll, and again, it goes back to when I was playing for the Mavericks, I was a roller. I had the legs, I was more athletic, I could dunk, and I was a great finisher. So every time and Nelly used to teach us, you have to look around for the shot blocker. Back then, there was more shot blockers and more centers. Now they're kind of fading away. So Nelly tried to teach you to pump fake before you go up to the rim. The best thing that ever happened to me when Steve Nash comes to me, he said, Eddie, I'm going to put you in a great spot. If I pass you the ball when you're rolling down the middle, down the gut, it's because I know I am your eyes. I know that you have a clear lane. Just don't worry. Trust me. Get up there and dunk it. I mean, how he made the game so much easier for me. So much easier for me. And it was incredible. One little tip that I got from Steve Nash made a big difference. A big, big difference. And then it went both ways. He respected me as a defensive player. And I want to say that back then, I was kind of the anchor. So I was switching from man to zone defense because we were pretty good zone defense. Not because we wanted to, but because we had some holes defensively. And I don't want to say it's Dirk, but yeah, we're trying to protect Dirk, not getting in foul trouble, making sure that he doesn't spend most of his energy there. So Steve always valued my opinion on defense, and he would always ask me, what do you want to play on defense? And a free throw, which is a great feeling because it makes you that you are providing something for that team. And Stevie was just, his vision for the game was incredible, his knowledge and his will to listen to his teammates, it was just incredible. Jason was very similar. Very similar. Jason was, okay, if somebody was having a good night shooting, he would go to you. He would overlook Dirk and overlook like a great point guard. He would go to the guy that was producing that particular night and exploit everything that particular night. That's what a great point guard does. Now, Jason Kidd was incredibly defensively. He's the guy that I was like, wow. I thought I was a good defensive player. This guy blew me away. He had great hands. And then he never had to even look back to Rick Carlisle. He would call his own plays, but not because he was in control. He wanted to be in control. He was the player that I've noticed, or the point guard that has been in sync mentally with the coach. So he already, whatever Rick Carlisle was going to call on the offensive, he already anticipated that and he knew. So they were so synchronized that Rick was just enjoying and going on a cruise control because he had one of the best minds on the basketball court. And that's what he brought. Off the basketball court, Stevie and Jason Kidd, great, exceptional human beings, easy to get along. You can have access to them and they would never shy away. They were very extroverted. They were talkative. They were mentors to younger players. They knew the game so well that they would also mentor the more experienced players. But also the basketball court, they would also have a presence with the community, with the boys, the girls. I mean, they were just all around exceptional. There's a reason why they are in the Hall of Fame.
And Eduardo, what's the best thing about coaching? And of course, you had legendary teammates, but you also played under legendary coaches. You know, George Karl, Don Nelson, Larry Brown, and Carlisle. What have you learned from them?
You know, coaching is first of all, is a really tough job. Very time-consuming, energy-consuming. I think that I had great coaches, great mentors. If I have to pick one, I was more like George Karl more so than than Rick or Nelly, which I played for Nelly for a long, long time, and also knew his brain. The best thing about Nelly was that he wanted 1 through 15. All the positions, you had to know all the positions. So in practice, he'll be, okay, Eddie, you're the point guard. Or Sean Bradley, you're the point guard, and I'll be the shooting guard, and Steve Nash will be the center. Because he wanted you to study the game and wanted you to develop that mind, basketball mind, and wanted you to know every single position in his system. George was more, he simplified things. George was more, gave you more confidence, but also simplified the game, and he would encourage you to make the simple play. And maybe the personality that we had an athletic team that we didn't really follow the system that well when I was with Denver. And it could have been, the fact that we didn't have those strengths or we didn't have the basketball IQ, so he had to simplify the game of basketball for the team. When I became a coach at a G League level, you have to do that, because if you overload players that are in the G League, and there's a reason why they're in the G League, a lot of them have the talent, but they don't have the experience, and they certainly don't have the basketball mind. So you have to sort of motivate them to do the little things, the intangibles, because they're still cut out with that ego by scoring 20 points and grabbing 15 rebounds. That's how I'm going to make it to the NBA. No. When you get to the NBA, you already have those superstars. You have to concentrate on playing the game the right way. Playing the game and obviously minimizing your mistakes. Because if you go into an NBA team, especially a playoff team, you have to minimize your mistakes. If you make a mistake, they're not going to tolerate that. They're going to take you out and possibly send you back to the G League. So you have to really study the game. That's the best thing about coaching. Now, in my case, the best feeling was when you call timeout. You call timeout and you have 1 minute to listen to your assistant coaches of everything that is going on the basketball court with your team. In the meantime, you're still thinking about all the team's personnel. You start thinking about the coach's tendency. What is he going to do? Is he going to switch to zone defense? What is his tendency? Who is the best defender? What are they going to do collectively? Who's tired? Who's not? So all of this is going through your mind, and now you have 20 seconds to come up with a play for your team and put the right people in the right spots to execute properly. In the meantime, okay, who's tired? Who's my guy? Who's my go-to guy? I mean, all those things rush into your brain, and when you have a basketball mind, is like the best feeling in the world, because you know that you're confident enough to do something positive for your team so they can have success on the basketball court and perhaps win the ball game. That is the best thing about coaching.
And of course, you're a superstar back home in Mexico. What have you done for the entire country of Mexico to bring basketball over there and kind of let kids, have their future and become the next Eduardo Najera?
I believe that I did not answer your question earlier. However, basketball was not as popular when I was 15, when we're talking about my background. The sport of basketball went through a rough time for the last 10, 15 years. The NBA finally kind of started globalizing the game of basketball, and Mexico has been a big market for the NBA, and they have done a great job in our country, to the point that has become the second sport that is played in the country of Mexico. Is becoming very, it has opened up the eyes for boys and girls. What have I done? Everything that I can. When I had an opportunity, and I have sponsorships, and I had people asking me to be a part of a professional league, but at the end of the day, we went through a rough time for 10, 15 years, so we lost a lot of talent. So I think, and what I did was created a youth league and start from the grassroots. and start the right way. Concentrating on fundamentals and values. Fundamentals of the game, the regulations, what's needed to play the sport, but also values as teamwork, discipline, commitment, the values that will help boys and girls get through anything in life. We started this basketball league, and my vision was I'm going to use my name, my time, and my money to run it. I did that with one objective, to find the next Eduardo Najera or the next girl that can participate in the WNBA. We start from the bottom, and the worst that could happen is we have a better level of basketball and they can represent our national team. That's exactly what I provided with the help of one sponsor and myself, and he ended up taking over the league. But we had about 50,000 boys and girls from ages 8 all the way to 18 at one point. And it was big for me to even be involved, but we had a company that basically took over, and that's what we created. We created a platform for these kids to practice and to develop as athletes. And guess who played in my basketball league? Jorge Gutierrez. He's the one that made it to the NBA. I wish there was more. There wasn't, but there was multiple boys that play in the Najera League back then. Now is the Telmex League is the name of it. Multiple players play in my league that has represented our country internationally, and that was my goal. So I was happy with that. They still have the league, which I'm very happy that I kind of set up a foundation, and they continue promoting basketball. Now they're teaming up with the NBA. The NBA is heavily invested, especially in Mexico City. I wonder why. Perhaps maybe an NBA team will be coming down there in the near future. But at the same time, the NBA has done a great job with the synergy they created with other companies down there, and they're just promoting basketball. And so hopefully we'll find more Mexican-born players that can compete in the NBA or the WNBA. There is a couple girls that went into my league that also play college ball, and I'm really proud of them because, again, I provided a platform for them so they can stay active, practice this beautiful sport, and also create an opportunity for themselves. And if it is finishing up college, I'm okay with that. That's a success.
And you mentioned that you would like to see an NBA franchise in Mexico. What can Mexico offer? And, what's the future of basketball in Mexico?
Mexico offers about 2.2 to 2.5 million NBA fans. We have small markets like San Antonio, Milwaukee. When you have a big market, you have TV, you have big corporations. Mexico City, I like to compare it to New York City. That's where the big corporations are, and they also have they know the importance of the community. And I think that it would work. That's what Mexico City offers. I believe that we have the arena set up already. We just need one of these guys to write a check for the franchises. I've been pushing for that for a long time. However, the price tags of an NBA franchise has gone through the roof. So I don't know whether somebody would do it. Perhaps the NBA, perhaps all the owners in the NBA see the importance of that market in Mexico City, and maybe they make it happen. But the first step is kind of there. A G League team is going to be the foundation. I think they're going to try to test the market, the demographics. I've seen them. They can support a G League team for certain, and perhaps an NBA team, but it's still uncertain territory. So we'll see. I'm excited about it. I see that the NBA has created academies in Mexico City along with the government, And those are also a big plus. They open a big store in the best area of Mexico City. So they are investing or heavily invested in that market. I don't want to say that's what they're leaning towards, but I believe that now they know the importance of that market, and hopefully they'll make it happen because it'll galvanize the entire country. When I look at Toronto, when I look at the Raptors, I look at Canada, and they bring the entire country together. That's what I see in Mexico City, and it'll be the coolest thing, and hopefully it'll happen in my lifetime.
Who are some of the Mexican-born players and Mexican players in the NBA who you're most proud of?
There's a few now. When I play, unfortunately, there was no Mexican-born players present, although my last year, which was kind of going downhill, Gustavo Yon came into the NBA, but I never had a chance to share the basketball court. But if I have to start, I mean, the most talented player in Mexico was Horacio Llamas. Llamas was the first Mexican-born player to touch the NBA, and he was one of my mentors growing up. I believe I was at the University of Oklahoma when I witnessed this guy play in Houston against Hakeem Olajuwon. He was 7 feet tall. Back then, he was 280 maybe, and he was very talented. Unfortunately, he ran into a lot of knee problems, and as a result, he had a short career in the NBA. But he's the guy that I think he should have played longer and had a better career than any of us. Gustavo Yon, kind of the same scenario. He came late, but this guy was very talented. However, he couldn't adapt coming from Spain to the NBA. He ran into a shoulder injury. And you know how it is. When you don't win ball games, the NBA or the teams are always going to try to replace you. And that was the case with Gustavo Yon. He got traded multiple times within a year, played for Orlando, played for New Orleans, Milwaukee, and then he ended up going back to Europe, unfortunately. And then the guy that I'm a big fan is Jorge Gutierrez. He was the latest one. I believe that he had the mental, the discipline. Unfortunately, he just didn't have the ability to stay in the NBA. But he's got a great career. But these guys have been incredible for basketball in Mexico. And, they're the ones who also opened the doors to the NBA, and we follow. But I'm just proud, but at the same time, I'm proud to have a long career and a better career than these guys in the NBA. But at the same time, I'm sad that they didn't stay in the NBA longer than they should have. But as a result, hopefully there's more and more to come, and maybe Horacio, myself, Gustavo, and Jorge can mentor all the Mexican kids when they make it to the NBA, so they can not just make it, stay, and have a long career.
And of course, you're a scout for the Dallas Mavericks. What's next for you in your career? Do you want to head back into coaching at maybe the NBA level?
Absolutely. I have some opportunities to coach at the NBA level. I do have kids that are at a young age, and to be a coach, you have to sacrifice once again. I did make that sacrifice coming from Mexico. I left my family. I'm the youngest. I left when I was young, so I didn't get the opportunity to grow up with my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters. I missed so many events. Same thing with my kids. When I was active as an NBA player, I did sacrifice my kids and my family, just the fact that I was always gone. We never had a Christmas break or a Thanksgiving break. It seems like we were always, active. And if we were not playing, we were practicing. So it becomes a little tough with family. And coaching, I started seeing that. And that's when I decided to go into the executive office. And the Mavericks were kind enough to offer me an opportunity there. But at the end of the day, coaching, to be a coach, you have to be a great evaluator of talent. You have to know how to evaluate talent, and vice versa. to be a heck of a coach, you have to be a scout, or vice versa. If you want to be an executive, you have to be a heck of a coach and know the game, because you want to go after the talented players that are going to be suitable for your franchise. So I think they go hand in hand. So I'm glad that this opportunity as a scout, like I mentioned, I concentrated more on pro personnel. I add more value there because of my connections, because I know more people at the NBA level. Heck, I still walk into an NBA arena. They think that I'm still playing and I retired a long time ago. But it means that I had an impact with the workers and the security people. But again, coaching is still there. Right now, my first child, my oldest, is going to college. She's going to OU, following the legacy for mom and dad. And then after that, every year I'm going to start seeing my kids go to college, and perhaps that's when I can revisit, coaching, because coaching is the toughest job. It's not glamorous at all. The one thing that I tell everybody, when you are a coach, the game never stops. Why? Because as a player, win or lose, you get to go home and forget about it and delete everything from your brain and get the next game and prepare for the next game. As a coach, no. You stay behind, evaluate, go through the film, pick the best things that we did that particular night, obviously pick the worst part and try to get better, but you stay at the office until midnight if you have to, breaking down film, watching film, coming out with ways to better the team. And guess what? You still have another team walking in that you have to study. So the game never stops. That's the way I see it. And, right now I don't think I have the energy or the time to do that. However, I hope that I get that opportunity in the near future.
And lastly, Eduardo, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You need a game winner from Carmelo Anthony or Dirk Nowitzki. Who are you going with and why?
Dirk Nowitzki, hands down. I mean, he provides, with his height, hard to block his shot. He can shoot it better than Carmelo. I believe that he has a better feel to make the right play or to hit the open man if needed. But it's close. It's close because the one thing that Carmelo had, a big heart, especially down the stretch. When the last shot came in, he was also very efficient, and he was never afraid to do so. In fact, he would get upset if he didn't take the last shot. Dirk, his ability to shoot the ball and even to get to the rim was incredible. I think that he's got the advantage over Melo, but he's really close. But I would pick Dirk Nowitzki.
Eduardo, thank you so much for coming on episode 12 of Inside Buzz. Where can we find you on social media?
Mikey, Eduardo.Najera14. Anytime, message me directly. Anybody. I'm actually getting connected now. I'm doing a better job now. It is me. It's not somebody else doing it for me. And I'm just happy to reconnect with the NBA fans and really NBA basketball fans throughout the world. So I'm here to help and here to talk basketball. So hopefully this would not be the last time for you or anybody that wants to talk hoops.
Another great episode of Inside Buzz. I'm Mikey Domagala. That's Eduardo Najera. Eduardo, thanks again, my man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys.